Good morning, everybody. We're going to wait a couple more minutes, let everybody join, and then we'll kick this off. People who have just joined, we're going to give it about another minute or so, let some others join, and then we will make a start. Thank you. So welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us this morning. My name is James Tant, and I am the Solution Architect for the EMEA region. With me today and co-presenting is Jeff. I'll let Jeff do a quick intro.
Yeah, hello everyone. Happy Thursday, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us. Yeah, looking forward to getting into this part 2 of this webinar series with you.
Brilliant, thanks Jeff. So as Jeff said, this is the second part of the 3-part ITSM webinar series. Part 2, which is this part, will be based on efficient handling of service requests. The third part is around building out change management program, which will be coming in the next couple of weeks. So before we start, I'd like to run over a quick overview of the newly released Cyrus and Analyst Portal Community Edition, and then I'll hand over to Jeff to provide some great information on service request handling, and then we'll wrap up with Q&A at the end. So first, I'd like to cover some housekeeping rules. Today's webinar is non-interactive, so please post any questions you have in the GoToWebinar question panel on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll answer those during the Q&A at the end of the webinar. If we're unable to answer, we can follow up via an email. Today's webinar will be recorded for viewing later on our YouTube channel. If you search for Team Cyrus, you'll find not only today's recording, but also previous recordings around the Cyrus webinar. So let's kick off today's session. So as I said previously, we have released a new addition to our family. We are very passionate about Microsoft System Center, and especially with the release of 2019 in the very near future. We're committed more than ever to the success and growth of Service Manager community. As such, on January the 8th of this year, we released the Analyst Portal Community Edition. We designed the Community Edition to integrate with Cyrus and Remote Management, which helps achieve your first call resolution in a single pane of glass. Let's quickly run over some of these features with you. So as you can see, you have the ability to create, view, and edit incidents. You can easily manage work item in a streamlined manner with Cyrus's out-of-the-box views. You have the ability to filter and search for incidents. You have the ability to work with activities linked to an incident. We have also included some basic incident dashboards for looking at all of those KPIs. And as always, our browser, it's HTML5 based, our portal is, and is mobile adaptive. So not only does it look great on the desktop, but also on a mobile phone or tablet, allowing your analysts to work on the go. So with recent changes to the self-service and analyst portal community editions, you're no longer required a license key. So it's simply just go ahead and download and install, and away you go. Like I said before, the analyst portal integrates with remote management and the advanced request offering application. Support for these community editions is free via our community website. We also offer the ability for you to purchase support packs, which will allow you to raise support tickets directly with our support team. If you would like more info on this, then please reach out to us on team at Saracen.com, or reach out to me or Jeff directly. So a very quick recap of part 1 in the series. So in our last series, we covered incident management, starting with the ITIL journey down to best practices. And if you missed this part, then you can always go ahead and rewatch it on the YouTube channel. So now let me pass you over to Jeff to take you over part 2. All yours, Jeff.
Thank you very much, James. Right, let me just share my screen and we'll be ready to go. All right, can everyone see my screen, please?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. All right, so let's have a look at this slide. So yeah, we've been talking all about kicking off our ITIL journey with incident management last week, as James covered, and so we're looking at service requests. So we're going to cover these areas here, why service requests, which we did touch on last week. We're going to recap on that a little bit, and then look over some best practice around service request fulfillment within ITSM and Saracen. So a little bit of kind of process stuff, how we actually define and document and maintain our service request processes. Then how we can use Service Manager and Saracen Portal to actually capture those requests and kind of work through the steps of that request, the process of that request. And we're going to finish off by looking at some advanced request offerings through Saracen Portal that can actually really help to bring a really solid experience to our end users with regards to actually requesting stuff and raising requests. So this slide we looked at last time round when we were starting to look at work items, tickets, according to ITIL, so hopefully we're all familiar. These are broken down into various areas within ITIL. We spent our time last week, 2 weeks ago, looking at incidents, and here we are today at service requests. This is where we are going to focus today. And just throw forward to 2 weeks' time, we'll be doing change requests at that point. So change management and our change process we'll be looking at in 2 weeks' time. Problem and release are not covered in terms of their own whole sessions on this series. Lesser used areas within ITIL. But we will be touching on them as we kind of go through the whole piece. But here's where we are today, focusing on service requests. We spoke last time about how important it is to differentiate between incidents and service requests. I think change, most people can understand the difference there and do track those differently. Change is very much an internal thing within IT and doesn't really get seen outside of IT to our end users, into our organization too far. maybe a couple of key stakeholders, but generally the average person like that is not aware of your change process. But incident process and service request fulfillment process, very much end user facing, and it is very important to make that differentiation of the way that we manage the work coming in from these end users. It's important that we're tracking the difference between things that have gone wrong, where effectively we've let someone down, we've not done our job as good as we could have done when there's an incident, and service request is somebody requesting something new, requesting access something, and that's kind of that ongoing work that we can capture. By capturing the amount of work we're doing in this regard, shows our organisation so we're not just sat around playing computer games, waiting for the phone to ring, that something's broken. There's all this other stuff going on in the background, this constant barrage of requests coming in from our business of stuff they want. And that's obviously takes up a lot of our time in fulfilling those requests. So what is a service request? Well, ITIL defines it as something that is structured, repeatable, predefined, and low risk. So something that we do, regularly, something that's a common process that happens over and over. That it's got a predefined set of tasks, set of instructions, workflow, whatever you want to call it, process, something where what is required in order to fulfill that is predefined, and low risk. So it's stuff that you're doing commonly, not big changes to systems, not whole new systems. That's change management. That's 2 weeks time. That's next time. Stuff that we consider low risk. So everyday stuff coming in from end users. And we've got some examples here. Request for a new computer, something that I'm sure we all deal with, weekly, if not daily. Every time we've got a new member of staff, there's going to be a new computer request coming alongside that. They need some equipment to work with, or you've got people changing roles and needing different equipment, or just fancying an upgrade, because let's face it, end users always fancy an upgrade. So that's something that must come up an awful lot for each one of us. Other examples: information request, people just asking questions, want to know where stuff is, how to access things. And another example here is user offboarding. So when someone's leaving or moving on or moving roles within an organization, there may be a whole load of steps that need to be done. It's going to be a structured process. It's repeatable. We do that every single time we have an offboarding, but also it's predefined. It's what steps need taking place. That's going to involve things like, closing off their accounts, releasing their software licenses, returning all their hardware equipment, deactivating their security tokens, whatever it might be. There's going to be a number of items there are going to need doing, but they're going to be repeatable and predefined. They're going to need doing every single time. So a perfect candidate for a service request fulfillment. Okay, the first example there, the request for a new computer, is the one we're going to kind of run with for the rest of the session and into our demo. So that's the one we're going to be looking at today. But the principles apply to these other two and any other service request. Access to data, access to email, requesting of any other new hardware or equipment. All of that, all the principles we're going to cover apply to all of that. And just want to flag up here that when we're looking at service requests, there's another type of work item which we're going to get into, which is called activities. Activities in quotes there. And it's just something we need to kind of get our heads around now if we're going to use service requests to its maximum potential. Now, you can have activities in incident management. That is possible, both process-wise and technology-wise. That's possible. We didn't cover it 2 weeks ago, of course. It is possible, but it's not very commonly used, and it's not very commonly needed, which is why it's not commonly used. Incidents are not structured. They're not necessarily repeatable. We hope they're not. Sometimes they are, but they're not necessarily repeatable. And they're certainly not predefined. We don't know what's going to go wrong. We don't know the exact steps it's going to take to fix something because we don't know what's wrong with it until we get into it. So it doesn't really fit the model so well. But for those of you wondering, yes, you can have activities on incident management, but it doesn't really fit the way that we work those. There's 3 types of activities within Service Manager. There's a manual and a review activity, and we kind of group this together as actions, things that actually need to be done. A manual activity is just go away and do something, get this task done. A review activity is someone needs to make a decision to actually review if something is going to happen or not. So those are what we call our action activities. We have parallel, sequential, and dependent activities. Group these together as a sort of workflow. These help control the flow of through these activities, the flow of information through these activities. So where we can have multiple things happening at once, we can put those inside a parallel activity, and they can both be worked on at the same time. This can actually help bring a lot of efficiencies, because if we've got two things that can happen at the same time, then if we're not doing that, we're doing them one after the other, the whole process is going to take a lot longer for our end users to get what they need. So if things can be done in parallel, and by using parallel activities and putting then the actual manual or the view, the actual action ones within that, then it means that they can both be done at the same time, and we can get a lot of efficiency. Sequential is the opposite, things that have to be done one after the other. And by using a combination of those two, parallel and sequential, we can build quite a complex kind of flow. You know, these two things can be done at the same time, but they both must be completed before part 3, that kind of thing. You can build up quite a complex flow that actually replicates what it takes to get these things done. Dependent activities, not many people know what these are for, but it's when you can link an entire service request to a part in another service request. So it's linking two service requests together so that one will complete when the other completes, something like that. We're not going to get a chance to really get into that much today, unfortunately, but if you want to go ahead and look up on that, you think that might be useful to you, then go ahead and do so. But it's about basically one service request depending on another, or works again for change, etc. And finally, we have some automation activities. Very useful if you want to start automating some information, doing some of the work for us. We have runbooks, could be orchestrator or SMA runbooks, or we also have, if you want to use it, we have the Sarazen PowerShell activity as well, which is just an activity which runs a block of PowerShell. So it's just a real simple building block for automation. I'm actually going to have an example of that in our demo today. So those two where we can actually start to automate either information flowing, automate actual tasks being done. All right, I think you'll be pleased to hear we've only got a couple more slides and then we can get into the demo. So as I said, we're going to, for our example today, look at this computer request process. And these are the kind of questions we need to consider as we're planning this process up. What needs to happen to get from start to finish? And this needs to be, as we said, it needs to be predefined, it needs to be repeatable. So whatever we define here has to work for every single scenario, or at least the kind of, 95%. There's always going to be edge cases where somebody needs something slightly quirky, or there's or needs it particularly quickly, or those sort of things. But we need to be able to, have this work for most scenarios where we can't be constantly changing our predefined process every single time. Otherwise, we're just losing the benefit of doing this. So who is involved at each step? What actually needs doing? What do they contribute? What actually tasks they need to do, or information they need to provide? And what information do we need? What information do we need to gather at the start of this process? That means we can see it all the way through to the end. Because what we don't want to do is have to, halfway through, go back to our end user and ask them more information. We want to gather all that right at the start, and then we can just flow all the way through and deliver what they need as quickly as possible. And it's really worth considering at this point, are there similar processes to incorporate? So the example here again is if we're doing a computer request process where they can request either a laptop or a tablet or a desktop PC, then actually once we've sort of started to think about our process, is a mobile phone request any different? In which case maybe this can come in to that same process. If it's the same steps done by the same people, the same teams, with the same kind of flow of information, then there's no reason why that couldn't be incorporated into this process to make it more manageable in terms of your process management, make it easier for your end users. They don't have to worry about what device goes where and which process to use for which device. They can just say, I need a piece of equipment, and they can start off that process. And then for also your team's actually going to be working this and fulfilling that. Again, they don't need to know two different processes or worry about which one is the right one for this. They can just follow it through. So opportunity to try and really simplify your process here by incorporating similar things. If mobile phones is widely different. It's done by a different whole team. There's a different procurement process in there because of budgets and all things like that that we all have to deal with. Then that's not going to work for you. That's going to have to be separate. But it's always worth considering, what can we group together here? What can we take advantage of by merging up and minimizing this repetitive work? And what you're going to hopefully produce once you've answered all those questions for your process is some kind of simple flow of tasks, of information through the steps here. So here we've got our approval, and we want that to be done by the manager that uses line manager from Active Directory. Then we've got a task to go ahead and obtain that equipment. That's going to be done by the procurement team. Now that could be that they need to actually go and order it because you haven't got one ready from your vendor. That could be that they can pull it from stock because they have one. It could be, a combination of that. Maybe they check stock. If they've got it, pull it from there. If not, it needs to be ordered. It's going to depend on your processes and different types of equipment, but we can simplify that into one step here, which is, obtain the equipment. Go ahead and get it, whatever that takes. And that team can have their own process defined, maybe outside of Sales Manager, of how you do that. Or maybe further on down the line, you could break that up with inside Sales Manager and have the different steps actually required there if you wanted to. Potential there to automate based on asset data. You could after stock checking, you could do something with your asset database, checking how many you've got in stock for whatever's been requested and do some automation there. That's all possible. And maybe you could do down the line if you're just starting off. You want to start with something fairly simple, check it works, and then iterate through with your ITIL continual improvement processes and improve it and streamline it. An important thing to hear, there could be several steps here in the in this obtain equipment step. There can be several things that need doing. As a rule of thumb, if it's all done by one team, then make it one block in your process. If one person, one team has to do several things, then that can still be one activity with Inside Sales Manager. If you break that up too far inside Sales Manager, it just means they've got a lot of clicking to do, a lot of waiting, a lot of kind of form filling just for the sake of it. So the good way to kind of know what do I break up and what do I group together is by who's doing it. If it's all done by one team, then make it one block as at least to start off with, and then go from there. If you've got 3 steps all dealt with by the same person, they're going to have to basically click completed, refresh the page, completed, and so on. It's going to be a very poor process, poor experience for your analyst there. So yeah, good rule of thumb is break it up in terms of who is actually doing it, either individuals or teams. Okay, the third step on our flow here is to actually deploy that equipment. That's done by the desktop team, as we can see here. And that again, that's going to may involve several steps, but they're going to know what it takes to get that done. Is go and get it on the desk, plug it all in, whatever the user requires, install this, set this up, whatever it is. You're going to have your own process for that. And we can group that all together into this just one activity to go and set up the equipment. Could be that's just a case of shipping it out, putting it in a box and shipping it because it's going out to a remote user, not based in your head office where you've got IT personnel. Again, that's going to vary from case to case, so we can sum it all up into this set up and deploy equipment stage. Last thing I mention here is that it's what you can see is this little flow diagram. People will commonly document these and draw these up in Microsoft Visio, and that's obviously a great tool to do so. But you just need to keep in the back of your mind that it's not quite a full flow chart in terms of a process flow that you commonly draw in Visio or even on a whiteboard, because it's got to be linear. There's no branching or splitting off available with Inside Service Manager. So yes, we have parallel activities mentioned. We can split off to do 2 things, but they almost always must come back together along that single one path. It's always got to be a linear path. There's no kind of if stop, go down this route, else go down this route. That sort of thing without complex automation is not possible within Service Manager. So that if you want to go ahead and do that, then that's really good or all technically possible. But if you're just starting off, you've got to start simple. make sure you walk before you run, and in that case, keep it a linear process and just make sure it's generic enough, just like we've done here, that we're saying either pull it from stock or order it, and that's all just in that one task. And the next task is still set up and deploy it, regardless of which path we came down. All right. If there are any questions as we go along, please do put them in the question box and we will take those at the end, as James said. I think we're ready to jump into the demo, which is great. So what we need to do is have a look here. All right, let's just into this. Okay, so this is our Sarazen Service Manager portal. Hopefully everyone's familiar with this from your own environments, from opportunity to have a look at the free analyst portal. You've had a chance to pull that down in the last couple of weeks, or at least you have seen it on previous webinars, etc. And what I've created a service request template to capture the process we've just discussed. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new service request based on that template. And here it is, the request equipment webinar demo template. And what it is a template. We've filled in some of the boxes here to kind of bring in the commonalities. The concept will always be the same, but it's going to require some further input from me as an analyst as I'm creating this request for my user. So, my title is templated there, the urgency and priority templated, etc. Some things are going to require some manual input, for example, who's actually the affected user, and a bit more information about what they actually want. We need a bit more detail than just equipment request. What do they want? When do they need it by? Maybe some further information. So it's going to take some input from me as an analyst to go ahead and do that. I'm going to go and fill in my user here, Lillian, and I'm just going to add on to the even title that it's a laptop that's required and need by. Obviously, they want it tomorrow because they're an end user. You get the idea there. We can fill in some more information as much as relevant, attach documents, whatever we need to do as part of our process to complete this order. I'm just going to click apply to get that saved, and then we'll have a look at our activities. Oh, that could be interesting. I've timed out. Might need to bear with me on that. See if I can. Just going to clear my cache and go again. That's what we get for. Let's just give that another save. Okay, apologies for that, just because I had the session open for ages before the webinar started. Here we are, we've created our service request now, SR1330, as you can see. And let's take a chance now to have a look in our activities tab at our activities. And just ignore the first one for a moment. You can see these three represent the three blocks we had in our diagram, our Visio diagram. The 3 stages in approval, which said needs to be line manager, either order or pull the equipment as a manual activity. So this first one is a review activity, RA, that's the decision required. Secondly, we have the MA manual activity to actually go ahead and get the equipment. And finally, another MA manual activity to set up and deploy, just as we had in our process. Have we said in our slide there that the manager could be automated? So we've got here at the very start, before any of that kicks in, is we've got a PowerShell activity. It's a Sarazen PowerShell activity that runs a little bit of PowerShell to set the manager. If we have a look now in our template, based on our template, you can see that the reviewers is blank. There's no actual reviewer set in the template. That's not something that's repeatable for every single request. That's going to differ from request to request by user, of course, depending on who it is. So we want to dynamically, based on who's actually raised the request, in this case it was Lillian, want to dynamically add in her line manager as the reviewer here. Slightly maybe simple example. There's many ways to achieve that exact example, but what we're demonstrating here is there's ways that you can make that reviewer completely dynamic based on any criteria. So it might be that it's not a line manager approval for equipment in your organization. It needs to go to a higher level. It needs to go like a cost center approval or some sort of business unit manager for approval of this. So again, we could build into that our PowerShell activity there to go ahead and look that up somehow in whatever system that data was retained. Or maybe there's a decision to be made. Maybe if the equipment they want is less than 500 euros, it goes to one person. If it's more than that, it goes to someone else. So we can again start to have our PowerShell allow that level of intelligence where it can pick the correct approver based on some information, or maybe it can look up out of office information, so it wouldn't assign it to someone who's currently out of office. All those things are possible. We've kept it simple for the example. Whilst it's running, I'll just quickly show you. This is the PowerShell script that actually that activity is running. So this is all built into our template. That when that activity runs, this is actually going to run this PowerShell on my management server. And what it's doing is it's just going to go ahead and get the user's manager and set them as the reviewer on the review activity. This is available. We'll make this available to you all after the webinar through the community site. So you can have this as an example, a starting block, and then obviously build out your own automation from there if you wish. Okay, so this should be running right now as I'm talking. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this service request and see if it's done. Let's have a look. And yet we can see that our first activity is now complete. It's done, it's run the PowerShell, it's done its job. So if we now expand again now our review activity, we should see we've now got a reviewer in here, which was not there from the template. Okay, so that's Lillian's manager. Let's just prove that. So if I jump into Active Directory and find Lillian, then her manager is Mildred Hernandez. Fantastic. Okay, so that's done its job. It's put the requester, the affected user's line manager in as our approver there. Okay, I'm going to just carry on logged on obviously in as me, but the idea here, assume you'll gather, is that this user here, Mildred, we can now log on and approve it. I'm just going to, oh, I can't approve it. I've got my security set accordingly, so I can't actually approve it myself. By default, any analyst can approve on behalf, but I've obviously locked that down in my environment here, which is good practice. But get the idea, that can be approved. It'll then go on to this activity. We'll go into in progress, which means you now need to order or pull the equipment and finally to set up and deploy. So we're going to work through those step by step. When each one gets completed, the next one down the line goes to in progress. If we had parallel, when we complete one, multiple ones would go into in progress altogether, and so on. And that means that those teams would get, alerted to that there's work to be done. Whoever we've assigned this work to in our template, get alerted there's now some work to be done on this service request. When the final manual activity gets completed, the whole service request completes automatically, and the job is done for the end user. They've got what they requested. All right, let's just jump back to our deck, because the next area we want to go into is then adding self-service. So that worked as an example, working it from the angle of an analyst. If somebody rings up or phones up and says, I need some equipment, we can create it from our template. Just as we said there, the template has saved in it those steps that's required to fulfill that request, including the automation step to actually fill in the correct approver as the line manager. What we probably want though is for an end user to be able to initiate that themselves rather than it done by an analyst. So that's where self-service comes in. We can use the Cyzen self-service portal to present these request offerings, as they're called, to our end users, so they can select what to do. And really, it's all about pushing that onus back to the end user so that they can initiate the request, they can provide the information, doesn't require any input from IT just to get that captured and created. The end user knows best the answers to what they want and these things, so really they're the person that should be able to provide that information. But the trick, the neck to it, is making sure we're asking the right questions to our end user in order to tease that information out. If we just say, hey, what do you want? We're going to get probably a one-word answer of laptop back. Not very helpful. We need to ask them a number of questions to try and extract exactly what they want. When do they need it? Anything special about it? All those kind of things. Where do they want it set up? Do they need it shipped? All those sort of things to make sure we kind of get all that information out as possible. So we're going to make sure we ask them all those questions. And it's really important we're doing that to capture all the information at the beginning. We don't want to have to go back and forth to the user all the way through the process. That slows everything down for everybody. What we're trying to achieve here is by capturing all the information at the start of the process, and then the actual service request can just flow through and be done. However, on the flip side, what we don't want is to present the end user with hundreds of questions or lots of questions. That's just going to make their process very cumbersome and confusing and difficult. They're just going to give up and phone you anyway, or walk up to your desk, or whatever your end users do. So we want to make the process easy for them and a great experience for our end users. And we can one way we can do that is by only presenting relevant questions, and we can use dynamic prompts to do that, to only make sure that we only ask them questions that are relevant to what they want. And we'll see that in our demo. Okay, so let's jump back into it. Okay, so I'm now going to jump into my Service Manager console to go ahead and set up an offering. Now, here we are in templates. In our console, we're in library, and templates we see there is our template for our equipment request, and we also have a activity template for our PowerShell activity. That's what that one is behind it. And again, this will be available to you as a management pack you can import. So you can import exactly what you've seen here and have a play with it, and hopefully build it from there. And we're going to build on that by wrapping it in a request offering. Now also here, rather than just ask the user, what do you want, and give them a big box, type in all sorts of wonderful things, I'm going to try and leverage our size and asset management information to make them actually pick something a bit more useful. So I'm just going to show you that really quickly before we get into it. I'll delve into asset management, administration, and all standards. Okay, I've only got a tiny amount of data in here just to kind of make the demo work. Hopefully have more options than that, but that's these two standards, what I'm going to actually ask users to pick from. Do they want a laptop or a performance laptop? So there's a decision there to be made. But it's not just a free text box that they could type all sorts of crazy things. I wouldn't know what they are, what they mean. I wouldn't be able to automate anything from that because they could spell things wrong or mistype things or put notebook or different language that means the same thing, but I wouldn't be expecting. Neither do I want just a drop-down list because that's hard to maintain. If I then add something else in as a standard, I have to go back in and add it. So we're going to get our offering to query this data directly from our CMDB and show them these two options. And actually, if we have a look inside one of these, then we can see that actually it relates to our HP 840G5 item. So if a user picks a standard laptop, then we fulfill that with this particular model of device. But they don't need to worry about, what's an HP 840 G5, when is it a G5, when is it a G3? It's all very confusing for me, so it must be confusing for end users. So they just need to know laptop or performance laptop, or obviously some options there, but really simple business language that they can understand. They don't need to worry about what actually model they're going to get. But behind the scenes, whether it be via automation or just somebody looking up in the same way I'm doing right now, we know how to fulfill that request. When someone orders a laptop, that's the actual item we order or pick from stock to fulfill that request. When this item goes end of life, as I'm sure it will do very soon, because that's what the hardware manufacturers like to do, we can just remove it from here and add in its replacement. And as far as the end users and the business is concerned, they're still ordering laptop versus performance laptop. We've just changed, what that actually means behind the scenes in terms of what model you get. But all the process that they've got and understood and documented, and anything around approvals, around those two options, all that can be static. It doesn't matter. We don't need to redo any work around that because they're just choosing laptop, performance laptop. Behind the scenes in IT, we might change how we fulfill that with the next, next model when it comes along. Okay, and that would allow us to potentially, use that information to look up in stock. If they pick laptop, we know then the system can then look up that internally and say, right, that's an HP 840 G5. We can then see, do we have any of those in stock, and so on. You can see we can then start to build that out with some clever automation to actually start to delve into, do we have any stock of that device? We wouldn't be able to do that if we had a pick list of performance laptop and laptop. So it's this use of the CMDB, the data behind that can help drive a lot of automation. As I say, we're not going to cover that today, that's down the line, but we want to make sure that we're kind of considering all these things as we build out these requests. Okay, so this is what we're going to leverage, this data here, as well as some other questions we're going to ask our user. So back into library and into request offerings. I'm going to go ahead and create a new one. For those of you who are familiar with Service Manager, will hopefully know what a request offering is, but you may not all know what an advanced request offering is, which is what we're going to create today. This is a product from Cyrozen that's sort of linked in with our our self-service portal in terms of the way it's presented, but as a separate offering from Cyrozen that gives you a lot more flexibility and control of how it actually gets presented to the end user. So we're going to create one of those today, and I'll point out a couple of places where it differs and gives you a better experience than a regular request offering. All right, I think it's doing something. It seems to be in a little bit of a go slow today. Here we are. Okay. So we get a little intro page here. That's what we created. We need to have a template already done. This process here, we're going to ask a number of questions from the end user, and ultimately it's going to spit out a service request. Could be an incident. In this case, we do a service request. The system is going to generate a service request for us. The actual date in that service request is going to be a combination of what was in the template and the information that we've asked from the end user in this case. And that's what gets created. But we do need that template behind the scenes. We always need a template for that. And I do recommend you create a separate template for every request offering. Even if you've got multiple request offerings with very similar or even identical processes that you could use the same template for, I do recommend you still break that up and you use an individual one. Because within Service Manager, a request offering gets tied very heavily to that template. And once you've created it, you can't break them apart again. And although they may be the same or similar today, you never know what's going to happen. And commonly what people find is they create it using the same template to save a little bit of time, save themselves 5 minutes of effort by using the same template 3 times. And then 6 months down the line, the organization changes, department restructures, and all of a sudden you need, one process needs to change, but not all 3. And then you've got this very difficult situation where you can't break them apart. You can't just change, one of them because they're always in the same template, and you end up having to recreate the whole lot from scratch. So really worth breaking up, and then you just future-proof yourself and make it much easier to maintain going forward. All right, so let's kick off this wizard. We're going to run through this wizard. I'm not going to have time to go through every single option. We are running out of time as always. But let's go for it. So this is a new computer request. I'm not going to give it an icon today just for time, but you can obviously give it an icon and that appears on the home page. And I'm going to select my template. Just beware, if you hit this select template where the wording is, then it will go straight to asking for a service request template. You can click the little down arrow and pick an instant as well, or even create one all on the fly here through the same wizard. Just people often miss that option there because it's slightly different. I'm just going to click here so I can find my request webinar template. Fills that in and it will automatically set my request offering into the same management pack as where my template is, which is very helpful. Okay, next through. We don't have time to sort of show this today, but a direct link offering allows us to have an offering on our homepage that isn't really a real offering, it just links us somewhere else. Really helpful for bringing processes that are outside Service Manager all under one roof. So if you've got, requests or anything reporting that maybe it's done as a SharePoint form or anything like that, in completely separate systems, you can just create what looks like an offering on the homepage. It just links you elsewhere, but it means that you can kind of bring it all in under your service self-service portal. So users know where to go to request anything, even if those requests are then hosted elsewhere. That's what direct link is for. Let's skip on to user prompts. So this is where we're going to actually have our questions. So again, we're going to quite quickly build this out. What type do you need? Okay, this is going to be our query results. That's basically our CMDB object picker. Now, if they pick a regular laptop, I'm going to let them carry on fine. But if they're going to pick a performance, I want to know why they are selecting that. They've got to actually justify that. So I'm going to say, why do you need the high performance? Okay. We're going to keep that as a required field. I want to make sure they do fill something in there. We can make things optional. I want to make sure that that is required. They have to fill something in there. But obviously, hopefully you're thinking, well, hang on a minute, what if they don't pick performance laptop? I'm going to cover that in the next section when we look at the dynamic prompts, as I've already mentioned. One more question just for the demonstration here, which is going to be, where do you want it shipped? Okay, and I'm going to keep that as a text box as well. We are a little bit tight for time, but you can see we've got lots of different options of data types we can ask for, from file attachment, integer decimal, all those kind of things. We're going to keep it simple for a text box. Okay, so those are my prompts, my questions. On the next page, we need to configure them. Now, some types, depending on the type I selected, some have no configuration. I think a checkbox has no configuration or a file attachment. Some have optional configuration. See, for a string here, if we select it, we can configure it. Some have mandatory configuration. You can see the one in red that needs configuring. So we need to configure them all. Let's start with the strings, a little bit simpler. It's just things like constraints. Do we allow anything? Do we want to force a certain sort of format? And do we want to limit the length? Always good practice to limit the length to something. Stop a user pasting in an entire essay of information. So I'm going to do the same here. Just limit it. Okay, and what type do you need? Here's my query results, my object picker. I want them to pick, as we discussed, a standard criteria. Now, if I had lots of standards, I may want to filter them somehow, not show them everything. Maybe I'd, have only standards available to certain users, something like that, through some sort of category of standard. I'm going to say, yep, show everything, but you can configure which standards will show and which won't. Which columns do I want to display? So which information from the standards do I want to display to help them pick the right thing? Not a lot of information on standards, of course, so I'm just going to pick the display name. But you could show other information if I had a a price field or a kind of approver to show them who's have to approve this. I can show that all the information in this in the request form so they know what they're requesting and what it will take. And finally, the options, what I want to do with it. Do I want to allow multiple? I don't in this case, but there's a case where that would be useful. And what do I want to do with this? As we're going to get into in a minute, every piece of information we ask the end user, we have to do something with it. We can't ask them, we can't expect them to fill it in and then let it drift off to nowhere. We've got to put it somewhere. And because we're picking an object here, we've got to make a relationship and we've got to do something with that relationship. And we can relate to either as a related item or as an affected item. And it's just two different ways to relate a work item to a configuration item. In this case, the related item makes a bit more sense. So I'm going to choose that option. So I can OK. So that will force that wizard. And now that one's all configured for me as well. And all prompts are now configured. OK, fine. Next page here is layout. This is where we can configure two separate things. The first is paging. We can break our prompts, our questions onto multiple pages, give that user a better experience. There's not a huge big wall of scrolling questions. They can't go to page 2 until they've configured everything on page 1. So it just helps them through that process. So I'm going to do that first of all. So I'm going to call page 1 computer. And I'm going to add a second page. And I'm going to call that shipping. I'm going to add my shipping prompt onto my second page. And one prompt can only be on one page. So by doing that, it takes it off page 1. Okay, this is obviously a very simple example here. Probably wouldn't need to break this onto pages, but as you can see, if you had a lot of questions to ask, it's helpful to break it up into the kind of the stages, the grouping of those questions, help user kind of understand how that works. Secondly, is we configure the dynamic prompt. So you can see by default, they're all set to show always. This one here is what I want to make dynamic. The why do you need the high performance? I'm going to click show always. I'm going to change that to show when true. Question, what do you need? Contains. I'm going to add the performance laptop. Okay, so if they're going to pick that, then that one's going to show because that's now true. You can configure that based on any question, any previous question, and the comparators will vary depending on what type of question it is. So if it's a Boolean, it will, is true, is false. If it's a text box, you get the contains or starts with, ends with comparators. Here, because it's a picker, it has to actually pick which items I want that to show for. So I want it to contain, if it's the performance laptop they select, then it'll show the question. And the really valuable thing here is if you recall, I kept that question as a mandatory question because I want to make sure that if they do select the performance laptop, they have to fill in a justification. Without the dynamic prompts, I'd have to do something like, if you've picked performance, please justify it. And therefore wouldn't be able to make that mandatory because they may not have picked it. And therefore it's very easy for you to skip that over. The way this works is if they select that performance laptop, this extra question will pop up and that will be mandatory. They have to fill it in. They may then kind of think, oh man, this is not going to get approved for me. I haven't got a valid reason. They'll go back and just select the regular laptop and that question goes away. So really good way to kind of guide your users through and try and encourage them to choose correct things and so on. Okay, final step, I'm going to have to pick up the pace a little bit here so we have time for questions, is mapping. Now, as I said, with every bit of information we ask, we have to put it somewhere. Now, the first thing we have already dealt with, that relationship we've created, but the other two questions we've asked are why do you need the high performance and your delivery shipping address, and we need to do something with that information. Now, in a regular offering, not advanced, we have to map prompts manually, one question to one field in our service request, which becomes very cumbersome and you very quickly run out of places to put things. With our advanced request offering, we have multiple mapping. We can map multiple things all to one place. And that allows us to really nicely build out these service requests that's going to get created. So for example, into the description field of the service request, I want to put that the justification is, and I just drop in the prompt there. And the system will fill that in. Whatever they've typed into that box, it's going to write that next to it. And finally, I'm going to put shipping address, same idea, and pop that in as well. Okay, whatever they fill in there, it'll just pop it into my description. So my description now reads a nice little summary of all the information that I've asked the user. Obviously, you're going to ask more than 2 questions, I hope, so we can put all those into one description. And as soon as it lands as a service request, all that information will be available in the description box. Really, really easy to read and understand exactly what needs to be done. The other one I'm going to use is the title. Do you remember my template? The title was templated to just equipment request. And when I created my manual, I actually wrote on the end of that what they'd requested. I'm going to do the same thing here. So my title will be equipment request. I think I spelled that wrong, but I'm going to carry on anyway. Request. And then just like I did when I did it manually, space dash space, and then drop in the what type do you need as well. So although I've mapped that already once, I can map it again. I can map it as many times as I want into as many different fields as I want. So my title will now read equipment request dash and then whatever they've selected as well. So again, from any kind of headline from the grid, so I can see a summary of all the work items. I can easily see what they've requested in that view. All right, I've mapped everything. If you don't map everything, you're going to get an error when you try and publish it. I have mapped everything, so I'm just going to whiz through to the rest of the wizard here. So that's straight into published and create it. I've really got to go quickly now, so I'm going to have to just won't have time to fully explain. But before we can see this on our portal, we need to add it to a service offering, make sure that users have permission to see it, and also restart our cache builder so that it's into our cache. So I'm going to do those things very quickly, and then we'll hopefully have a chance in the last few minutes just to see it in action. So apologies for this slightly slow saving here. Hopefully it's going to work and just taking its time. I'm all ready to restart my cache builder service. So this is the Windows service here that runs on your portal server, and it creates the cached copy of your request offerings that the portal reads from. So we need to restart that as a way of quickly getting this new offering into our cache. If you don't want to restart that service, you need to wait until it caches up with itself, which could be a maximum of 24 hours. I'm obviously in my lab, I can restart that with no problem. And to be honest with you, even in your production environments, you can restart that without too much problem. And it's done, so close. Let's find it. Going to add that to a service offering straight away. Add that to hardware requests offering. I've already got set up, and as we said, restart my cache builder service to get that straight into my cache. Okay, back in my portal, I'm going to go ahead and get this log back in as well. And we should see it appear on our home page, and we can give it a quick test. So, going to leave that request offering, go back to home page, see if we can see it already. Under hardware requests, no, not yet. Let's just give it another refresh. Not coming through yet. Service is still restarting. I do apologize, I seem to be on a complete go slow this morning. There we are. Okay, finally that's restarted. So once that's restarted, even in a busy large environment, you shouldn't have to wait more than 1 or 2 minutes for that to come through. I expect it to come through pretty quickly. I'm just going to do that as well to make sure we don't have any caching issues by our browser. See if we can get this forced through as quickly as we can to show you. Here we are. Okay, so there it's appeared, new computer request with no lovely icon, I'm afraid yet, but yeah, let's go ahead and see what this looks like. There we are. We've got our form here. So we can see we've got our two-step process, computer first, and then our shipping area. Because I'm still logged in as myself as an analyst, I do get the request on behalf of option. So I'm going to go ahead and pick my same user again. An end user wouldn't get that unless you've specifically allowed them to see that. In that case, they just get it logged as themselves. But as an analyst, I can do that. And here we are. What type do you need? And there you can see my two types. And I'm going to go ahead and pick the performance laptop. And we can see that I've got that question popped straight up. If I had picked laptop, as you see, it goes away. So I've got to justify something here. I want to play games.
Good justification.
Standard. Yeah, standard, right? And then finally now, once I've filled in all the required fields there, I can then next through to the last screen and to my house. And again, classic example why maybe that wasn't the best question. You want to maybe get them to pick from a list of business locations so they can't just type to my house, which is useless to you, and hit save. And what that'll do, it's taken the answers I provided here, it's taken the template, and it's combining the two things together to create the service request. Here it is, and I click straight onto it so we can open it up. And we'll see that it's created the request. There we are. So equipment request, performance laptop, is put in that. And then there's my justification and my shipping. It hasn't added in the line return. Not quite sure why, but there we are. So we've got, in theory, if we'd asked better questions, all the information we need now to complete that request based on our activity, which is still there because that one comes from our template. So this will come from the template. The low, medium, etc. came from our template. This information came from our multiple mappings. We've got a combination of the data there. And we can now go ahead and fulfill that request. All right, a little bit rushed at the end there. Hopefully you stay with me. I'm going to throw it back to James to wrap us up with the final slide.
Thank you, Jeff. No, that was very good. Hope everyone found that interesting. We've got a couple of questions coming, so we'll run over those in a moment. So yeah, like we said before, all of our webinars are recorded, and if you missed part one or you want to watch this one again, then you can go ahead and go and watch those on YouTube. Just search for Team Saracen. We'll quickly fly through the rest of these. So as we said before, the Analyst Portal Community Edition, the free edition. If you're not currently using it or you're not using our full version, I'd encourage you to go ahead and download that one. No license key is required for this version. Support is free for this version via the community, or you could purchase support packs if required. Just reach out to myself or Jeff. If you go to our community site and search for ITSM space journey, you will find all the links and all the other stuff Jeff's covered to this webinar there for you to go ahead and download. And if you have any questions that you need to ask, you can go ahead and ask those on there as well. Part 3 is coming up, and if you haven't already registered, then you can go ahead and do so via saracen.com. So if we move on to Q&A now, please, Jeff. Peter's asked, can we manage AROs using PowerShell? Because they don't want to click all prompts and dozens of requests offerings manually. I don't believe you can. Jeff, can you correct me on that one?
I'm not quite answering that question, Peter. Do you want to maybe rephrase that, or James, help me out? Because I'm saying, can we manage ARO using PowerShell? Don't want to click all prompts in dozens of requests offerings. As in, you don't want to have to configure them all manually. You want to create them with PowerShell. Is that, Peter?
Yes.
So you, not the advanced stuff that I'm aware of. You can build regular offerings, including all your prompts, your questions, what type they are. All that can be done via PowerShell using at least SMlets. I'm not sure about the native commandlets. I prefer SMlets. But I'm not aware that you could do any of those advanced things such as the dynamic prompts via PowerShell. So you,
No, it's
if you
not.
want to do
Yeah,
that on multiple requests, you would need to come in and do that manually.
yeah, there's no commandlets for that. Perhaps that's a good thing to request on our community. It's something possibly someone could create those. That'd be good.
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, you can. It's all configured in. It goes into an XML management pack, as all request offerings do. So if you had lots and lots to do, you could possibly look at doing that in XML, Peter. Especially if there are lots of similar ones, you could copy them and then just tweak them individually. So you could configure it via XML, and obviously you could write then PowerShell to build your XML potentially. So there's possible ways around that, but not kind of natively in the way you were suggesting. I'm afraid not. But good question. Thank you.
Peter was asked another one around management pack enumeration lists prompting the multi-mapping, which would mean converting it to a string at first.
The answer is yes and no.
Yeah.
You can map an enumeration list into, say, description as a string, and it will just put the string value of that enumeration into your description. So it'll actually, if you wanted to put into that description, hey, the user has requested a whatever, and then you've got your value from your MP enumeration list, then yes, that is possible. But you also have to map it to the enumeration as well, using the traditional map prompts section. So if you just do a multi-mapping of it, when you try and publish a request, it'll say that you've not mapped that prompt, and therefore you also need to map it to actually directly into that enumeration as well. And that means that you might need to extend your service request class to have to support that enumeration if you haven't already. So yes, you can do the multi-mapping, but you also have to do the regular mapping at the same time.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions someone wants to ask? If not, like I said, you've got our community site. If you go to our community and search for ITSM journey, you could also post any questions you can think of there.
Yeah, sounds like Matt had that same issue with the enumeration mapping, so glad we managed to get that one explained for you, Matt. Thank you for joining. Yes, if there's any more questions, we will take them now, so please take the opportunity. But yeah, as James just said, if you think of anything after right now, then please do reach out, put it on the community, contact me or James directly. That's all fine as well. So we're gonna give you guys just another 2 minutes or so to ask any final questions. But if not, I'd like to say thank you very much for attending to you all. And I look forward to seeing you all again on part 3.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Yeah, no other questions coming in. Right, thank you very much, guys. Like Jeff says, look forward to seeing you all in a couple of weeks' time on part 3. Have a good rest of your days.
Bye, everyone.